Hello, Steve White, Steve White 89. Well, I just finished the last episode of Des. It was interesting. Um, like I said before in my other videos, my disappointment with the series is they're focusing more on the case than the crimes. But they have done a great job of the writing, the directing, the acting, the casting. Um, so it is a great show. But I still am waiting for the definitive movie that actually shows what Des did. I want to see it. I want to actually see how he lived with the corpses. I want to see how he killed them. I want to see like how someone could live like that, be like that, like as opposed to just how someone was tried for it, because that's easy to understand. There's no mystery there, but it is a mystery how this person could have done what he did and been who he was and functioned. So that's what I was interested in. So we didn't get any of that, but whether anyone wants to actually try and do that or tackle that or try and portray that, probably not. But I still want to see it. But it started off with a little bit of footage from the news of him being arrested and talking about that. And then they pretty much go right into what was his name? God, Masters. Brian Masters. That's what I thought. Brian Masters. Brian Masters comes in and is basically like, what the? How are you? What? Huh? And he explains that, well, I didn't have any psychiatric treatment. I didn't have any legal advice. How do I know I'm in my right mind? I think someone else should determine that. So that's why I'm going for diminished responsibility, which is how he was justifying the pleas of not guilty. There was diminished responsibility, that he was insane and he didn't know what he was doing. And that became a huge debate. And that's something I kind of forgot about when I was looking at the case. I was always interested in the murders, not the case. And I kind of forgot that he pled not guilty and at least, I don't know what he was trying to do. Was he trying to just, because the idea was if he got manslaughter and then was treated, then in 15 years he'd be able to get out. Was he thinking of that? I guess he was. Or was he actually just trying to wanted someone else to actually decide what it was? Was he crazy? Was he just evil? Was it all premeditated? Was it not? So, what is the answer to that? I don't know. You'd have to, okay. Is it premeditated? You take people home. He surely must have known after the first two people that he was going to do this. I think he said that you'd say that you won't, but then you do. So the question is, what frame of mind was he in? They went through how, in the interviews, he told a lot of detail about the cases, about the murders, about the crimes, but he never said anything about his attitude, his feelings, his thoughts, what he was thinking, that he planned anything. I don't know. Was he planning this the whole time? Was he thinking of his defence the whole time? Was he leaving out those factors knowingly, or did it just happen that way because they weren't premeditated and they weren't planned and he was out of his mind? It's really hard to know. Now, they had one of the problems with the jury, with the case, was one of the witness, the first main witness, was undermined because although he definitely was a victim, and Dennis admitted this, he did sell his story to someone and he did sort of add to the story, like the address and certain details, like things he didn't remember, he just made up apparently. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, doesn't mean he wasn't a victim, it just means he wanted to tell a more compelling story in order to sell it, which I don't really want to judge that, frankly, but it's interesting. So once they asked him, he sold his story, that was over in the court case. So then they have to go to well, Masters actually after that is struggling to work out what he seems to be struggling the whole time he's talking to him with just the outrageous nature of Dennis's assumptions, the arrogance, the narcissism, the coldness. It's all about him, and he has such conviction when he's talking, and he's just so. I would never want to meet anyone like that, even if they weren't a serial killer. And he's like, well, it's really just for the court to work out whether I'm bad or outrageously bad. And eventually the investigator, I think it was Peter J. I keep calling him the investigator, but Peter J. went to Carl, I think, was it Cotton? I've forgotten his last name. They didn't mention his last name, but Carl Sotter. Carl Sotter? No, I'm thinking of someone else. Either way, they discover him before the case, but he's such a mess, they know they can't put him on. Well, they assume they can't put him on the stand, so they don't even consider it. He thought he was having nightmares, and it was all coming from an abusive relationship that he'd broken up, that he'd left just before he met Nielsen. But because he was in a therapy group, and someone basically contacted the police and said, I think this guy's a victim. So they spoke to him. He obviously was, but he was a mess. And it was hard to watch his performance because I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and he is a mess. It destroyed his life. And I don't know what destroyed his life more, the murder, because he was killed and then brought back to life. The attempted murder, what happened with Dennis, or what happened afterwards, where, because basically they went to him, and they went back after the first witness kind of was undermined, and they asked him to tell his story, and he was like, I can't be in the same room with the man, I can't do it. And he wasn't going to do it, and then they said, well, I'll subpoena you anyway, and he's realised he doesn't have a choice, and that was pretty harsh. But I think it was actually probably going to court that ruined his life more than the actual assault, because he'd managed to deny it happened, and he probably would have healed from it to some degree and gone on with a normal life. He'd been, before that, I'll get into that. He was vilified in the press, and all the people involved with it were vilified in the press. The victims and the people who did survive, because the other person that they didn't mention at all, and I'm really surprised they didn't mention it, they didn't feature him, but Dennis had a boyfriend for a while before he was caught. And this man went into his house. This man literally held the door when Dennis's dog got out, and there was a body being cut up in the house, which he could have seen. He had a lot of close calls. He's lucky he survived. And he had no idea what was happening, but the press tore him apart. And that destroyed his life as well. So it's horrible to see him tell his story and to realise, what happened to him. And to see the homophobia in the court, where they literally bring up the fact that he was a drag queen before and imply that because he was in an abusive relationship that he just liked that sort of sex, so it was just a sex game that went wrong, things like that. And when he left court, they actually had someone saying, that he should have killed you, you queer. And that's what someone said to him outside of the court, and that's what people did say. And that attitude was something that I think was more involved in the case at the time, and something they didn't really deal with, which was kind of disappointing. So I'm just looking at my notes and thinking, what have I missed? Well, after that, of course, the jury deliberates. Of course, the investigator is questioned, and he does a fairly good job, but the jury does the defense does a good job of twisting everything. They do a good job of that. They do point out just how he brought Carl back to life, and when he wasn't trying to kill him, the rest of the time he was nice to him, nicer than anyone had been in his life in years, and so forth, and that. And they do make it look like just how could this happen? How could this nice man do this? Because he was crazy. And they did a very good job. At least it's portrayed they did a very good job. Now, it took the jury a couple of days to actually decide, and they didn't come to a unanimous decision, and they ended up just going with the majority. And fortunately, the majority was for murder, guilty. So each case of murder was read out. He was found guilty. And they show the people, the family members hearing, each case being, guilty. And something else they did, they focused on the girlfriend, because the girlfriend of one of the guys who was killed, the one who wasn't actually included in the charges, she had a go at him. She was in the audience, the courthouse. She was crying. The investigator went out to speak to her, and she said, "They're using him, or you're using him. Basically, you didn't care. You really just wanted to be known as the ones who caught him. You really didn't care about the victims." Which I think was pretty harsh, if that's what she really said to him. And eventually, he's in jail. He speaks to Brian. Brian visited him for 10 years after the case. Brian wrote the book, and he had some notes. Like, he thought it should be called Nielsen, because it should have been about him, basically. And what Brian Master said was basically, it's not about you. It's about what you did, and it's a warning to people who you are, how you happened, and a warning. And it's not about making out you're something special. He visited him for 10 years. Dennis thought he was the most important person of the century. He just had, he was a narcissist, and he was just horrible. Afterwards, they show an interesting scene when both of them are in his apartment, the investigator and Brian Masters, and they're like pondering, what are they going to do with this place? Who's going to live here? What are you going to do about the smell? And what could have been the last line of the episode, which would have been interesting, because the question is, how could you do this? How could you live like this? The investigator says, "I don't smell it anymore." And the idea that you could get used to something like that is a very disturbing idea. And of course, they go with, at the end, they go through some cards. They say how Brian Masters released the book in 1985, that it was a bestseller, and that he kept visiting Dennis Nielsen for another 10 years, so till 1995. Now, he died in 2018. Just wait a second. No, he didn't die. The detective died in 2018 from cancer, and it's the same year as Dennis Nielsen died. The detective only worked for 2 years after that before he quit. So I'm guessing it affected him. And they only found 8 members of 8 victims, the names of 8 victims, only identified 8 of them. Dennis said there was only 13, and he made up 15 as a guess, and he made up 2 of the actual murders when he was telling them. And whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. It looks like Brian was doubting him. But yeah, that's just basically what happened. That's how they end it. They just do some cards. They point out that Stephen Holmes, who was the first victim, was only 14 years old, which I don't know. I don't think they did. I don't think they really did justice to the victims. And something Dennis said was Brian didn't mention any of the names in the book. He wanted to protect their privacy, and he kind of felt like, well, I don't think that's good. I think you should be. I think you're kind of not acknowledging them, and I kind of feel like they could have. I think it would have been better to actually see the crimes, see the victims, not just they're still just kind of names. I mean, they do a good job of Carl and the girlfriend, but yeah, I'm just hoping for an actual movie, because I think for a TV series I would have expected more. I mean, this is 3 47-minute episodes. That's like 2 hours and 15 minutes or something. It's really not a lot. 2.5 hours maybe. It's longer than a film, but not much. So I really want to see a film on his life, his crimes, and I hope someone makes it. Someone will. I'm sure someone will. There's been several Jeffrey Dahmer films, and now that he's gotten some attention, because people seem to forget about Des, I'm not sure. Jeffrey Dahmer kind of came up like 7 years later and kind of stole his thunder with the cannibalism and being a little bit more interesting, I think, as an actual person, so far as and he died, so it was easy for people to talk about him. But yeah, I liked it. It was good, but it was much more of a drama, a court case drama, court drama, than it was a story about a killer and the victims and the crimes and everything. So I did enjoy it. I got kind of emotional when they were dealing with Carl, because he's a real person and he's real to me because I've seen so many interviews with him. He's one of the only people in this that seems real. And I don't know what I would have done if I'd gone through that. I've had some bad things happen in my life, but nothing like that. And yeah, it's a bit haunting, but I'm going to go and do something else. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. What do you think of Dennis? What you thought of the show? Apparently there was a documentary shown around the same time. I know some people talking about it online and that. I'm just going to go do a bit of research. I do want to see what changes they made and any differences between the real story and the TV series, because I don't remember every element of the story, even though I've been living with it for like my whole life. I've always been interested in it. But yeah, I'm going to go do a bit of that. I might watch something else and come back to it. I don't know. I kind of want to get Dennis out of my head. But I'm going to go. Thanks.